What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. This video is an update to one of our systems in the greenhouse facility. We are slowly updating each of the systems to clean them up just a little bit. About a year ago, we reworked the lighting over top of the system sitting beside it to house 30 Ecotech Radeon XR15s. That other project was fairly straightforward because it's basically two 8-foot by 4-foot canopies going over top of two 8-foot by 4-foot tanks. This system, however, has a different layout entirely. It includes a number of glass tanks ranging from about 75 gallons to 90 gallons and 300-gallon Rubbermaid stock tanks that cascade down to a 150-gallon Rubbermaid stock tank sump, where a protein skimmer sits and the return pump sits. The lighting and other devices will be different to account for all of these peculiarities. Let's start at the top and work our way down. The biggest change will be switching from our old chain link hanging fences down to a proper hanging canopy. We borrowed the chain link fence idea from when there were plants in this half of the greenhouse. It was cheap and very resistant to water drips, which was nice. The way we hung them down originally was using aluminum wire, which occasionally did break. There were some unfortunate days where a light fixture took a bath. Yikes, yeah. Over time, we upgraded that hanging system to nylon cords that had like an adjustable pulley. They were much nicer, but fast forward a bunch of years, and we've learned a lot of better ways to do this sort of thing. The hanging fence idea was okay for its time, but like I said, we've learned a lot since then, and constructing a purpose-built canopy is just a much more robust way to suspend equipment down from the greenhouse structure. It's something that we plan to do over top of every system of tanks here, but it's a big job, these things take time, and eventually we will be installing 3 separate canopies over this set when it's all said and done. The construction is a simple 2x6 frame with 2x4 supports going across, and the top is 3/4 inch plywood. Thick enough that we can screw lighting and power bricks in all sorts of different orientations directly to the plywood if necessary. Now hopefully we will be able to mount directly into a 2x4 support, but in most cases I wouldn't really hesitate to install it directly into the plywood. Hanging heavy canopies down from the greenhouse structure was something that we've been planning for several months now. We asked the plumber to install galvanized steel unistrut the entire length of the greenhouse, so that we could one day hang fixtures down and have it be ultra secure and robust. For hanging hardware, we decided to use stainless steel cables, stainless steel D-rings, and turnbuckles for fine-tuning and leveling. We have used the same system to hang several canopies so far, and we've liked it quite a lot. The stainless steel wire cutting and crimping kit has paid for itself many times over and will have plenty of future uses. It's one of the best tools that we picked up along the way. As a quick aside, we painted the canopies white, and this time around I used Sherwin-Williams Exterior Emerald. Normally I wouldn't talk about paint, but this paint is crazy. My first experience with it was when I painted the underside of our Set C canopies. We went with like a matte black for those for photography. When I went to clean my roller pan, it was just simply not coming off. It had barely any time to dry from when I was finished painting to when I was cleaning it in the sink, and it was basically rhino liner. I couldn't scrub it off under running hot water. Pretty much after that experience, I was sold on emerald after that. So for these canopies, we are going with a semi-gloss exterior emerald, which should really hold up well in the greenhouse. There are some obvious benefits that this new canopy provides. The first being protection from both sunlight and water splashing down from the greenhouse structure above. Starting with the sunlight issue, in the summer, it gets a lot of light for a long period of time, and that light is pretty brutal on electronics. This is less of an issue these days because last summer I painted the entire greenhouse white, and that drastically cut down on the sun coming into the building. Over time, the greenhouse is becoming less and less like a greenhouse and more like a conventional building. Had I known that it would have made this much difference in heat management, I would have done it decades ago. In the winter, the metal building condenses the humidity that's inside the greenhouse. When the condensation gets bad, there are streams of water flowing on the inside structure, and oftentimes it drips down onto the tanks. This is bad for two reasons. I don't want it dripping down on exposed electronics like power supplies and lights, but I also don't want random chemicals and metals getting into that condensate and then dripping into my tanks. Having said that, it's been happening now for 20 years, so it's not the end of the world. Our tanks still operate, but this is a preventable issue, and we are working our way towards preventing it now with these new canopies. What I love about this canopy design is that we're able to install all of our devices on the underside, either directly to the 2x4 supports or in some cases to that 3/4 inch plywood if need be. When things like power supplies and power strips are tucked underneath, it keeps it both out of the sun and makes it very unlikely to be splashed by condensation from above. I suppose it's still possible to be splashed from below, but the canopies sit on average a good 3 to 4 feet above the tank, so it's, again, very, very unlikely. In fact, the canopies are hanging higher than the previous metal fences, so in addition to being less of a splash risk, we have more headroom to work over top of the tanks and the tubs. Second benefit, it's going to do wonders for our organization. The previous method with the hanging fences made for one of my biggest pet peeves, that being snake pits of wiring and power cords. Cable management will be a much easier process with this new canopy. When we were taking these fences down, it was so refreshing to go through and give this thing a proper electrical audit. There were all kinds of weird things that we could improve upon and streamline. For example, there are some LED fixtures that were over 10 years old, and some of the LED pucks had burned out. In one case, I think that there was a 4-foot fixture, and literally 3 of the 4 pucks had burnt out. There were old T5 fixtures that we bought on Amazon, and they worked great for $80, but it's been 6 or 7 years now, and they're all basically toast. Let's see, what else? We found a neglected power head that was more algae than power head. That happens more than you might think here. There are so many devices that a power head can just get randomly tucked away too secretly and simply forgotten about. The opposite can also happen. Occasionally, we find a power head that was unplugged for some reason, probably maintenance, and was never plugged back in. And lastly, this is my personal favorite, power cords that go nowhere. It's not plugged in, and nothing is plugged into it. It's just some random power cord that's just sitting on top of one of these fences doing nothing. So in short, it is good to break down a system to uncover some of these hidden gems every now and again. Third benefit, the canopy will normalize the lighting that the corals underneath receive. Again, this isn't as big of a deal as before I painted the whole building when more light was coming in. Still, in the dead of summer, a little bit of shade goes a very long way. These canopies effectively isolate the tanks underneath from sunlight. For a long time, fluctuations in light going from summer to winter and back were not a great thing for corals. Between the greenhouse whitewashing and the canopies, that issue is more or less eliminated. Speaking of lighting, we are trying a bunch of new things on this particular system. As I mentioned before, we are retiring a lot of older fixtures and giving some new models a try. The greenhouse, in many ways, is like this mad scientist laboratory. We try things out here first. The greenhouse is a pretty rough environment compared to the new building. So if stuff holds up really well here, it speaks volumes for the build quality and engineering. Lighting in particular. One thing that we've always wanted more of were lights that didn't rely on cooling fans. Fan units, especially in the greenhouse, tended to be the thing that failed first with most fixtures. And once cooling is compromised, it's just a matter of time before the rest of the fixture is going to have issues. Sometimes fans can fail from humidity issues or from just dust getting gunked up in them. We are trying two different brands on this front, GNC and Philips. The GNC Blu-ray is an Italian light that uses a bunch of low power LEDs to make this blanket of light. The hanging kit out of the box worried me just a little bit. I'm used to over-the-top heavy-duty stuff, and this hanging kit probably works just fine, but again, I'm used to something a lot beefier. But there is a heavy-duty hanging kit accessory that Aquarium Partners, who sells GNC, they sent it to me, and we will be remounting them using that bracket. So far so good in the light. Again, we don't really do a lot of like hardcore measuring testing, but we wanted to see how well these lights are to control and how long they last over top of our fixtures in the greenhouse. As of this recording, we have yet to install the Philips Coral Care, but I am excited to get those suspended. We are waiting on that next set of canopies to go up. As for suspending them, guys, these are heavy lights. The power supplies are inside the fixture, so when you pick one of these things up, it feels like you're lifting a 35-pound plate. When it comes to hanging these guys in the canopy, we're going to go ahead and make sure that it is well secured. I don't think that we're going to be going directly into the 3/4-inch plywood with this stuff. I think that wherever those 2x4s are, that's where these lights are going to go. Once we install the Philips Coral Cares over this 300-gallon tub, it's going to free up the 4 Ecotech Radion lights that were over it previously. These lights we plan to repurpose over a 220-gallon tank that we have in the greenhouse that will one day be relocated to the new building. It was one of these tanks that was a show tank that kind of never materialized into a show tank of any sort in the greenhouse. It was arguably the most neglected tank that we have. It's gross. And it is such a nice custom tank that it really does deserve a more elevated position in the new building. That project, July at best, so don't hold your breath on that, y'all. Anyhow, back to the GNC and Philips lights. The other feature that these lights boast is that they are weather sealed. We still have plenty of lights that are not yet under protective canopies, and occasionally they get dripped on. Having some protection from that is a welcome addition. But aside from drips, again, the canopies should pretty much prevent all that. The greenhouse experiences very high humidity almost all the time, and it's not something that we can control well in this building. So if the fixtures can have some degree of protection from that, very welcome addition. Weather sealed fixtures are a great luxury in these applications. Outside of those new fixtures that we're trying out, we are reworking the lighting over a small 75-gallon tank dubbed the quote-unquote photography tank that Becca uses to shoot. This tank uses mainly T5 because it gives us the best results for photography and videography. We have a little bit of LED on there as well, but the majority is T5. The only problem was controlling all the different fixtures. Previously, Becca had to track down all the different wires and see where a certain light or a pump was plugged in and then unplug it to do any sort of control. It was, again, a snake pit of nonsense. This lack of organization also created the likelihood that a pump or light would not get plugged back in. Now, we have all of this hooked up to a Casa Smart Power Strip that's programmable, so even if someone were to leave a power head off, the program would turn it back on at the end of the workday. Similar story with lighting, but inverse. They will all turn off at the end of the day and then fire back up in the morning. Aside from the canopies, we did some plumbing work on this system. We decided to redo the return pump and the return lines. Way back when, I thought I knew how to plumb tanks pretty well. Then I met my current plumber. It turns out I was not a very good plumber at all. Working with him the past few years, I learned a ton from how he does things and why certain plumbing things are done the way that they are. This system's plumbing was basically crayon doodle quality. So after some thoughtful redesign, we streamlined everything. The new design probably shaved off about 30 plus feet of unnecessary piping and expanded the size of the lines from 1 inch in diameter to 1.25 inches in diameter, which, if you guys know anything about flow dynamics and pipe size, it is a huge deal. As for the return pump, we upgraded to a Deltec eFlow 16 return pump. I really should do a separate video on these return pumps, but in short, I like them a lot. They are exceptionally powerful and very high build quality. We immediately noticed that it was a lot more flow going into these tanks, and this was for a number of reasons. The streamlined plumbing, big deal. The pump upgrade to a premium German pump, also a big deal. But the most impactful thing was probably just new piping in general. It turns out that 10 to 12-year-old pipes have things growing inside, and it was super gross. Certain sections were basically completely clogged. So, new pipe, we ended up throwing out all that old nasty spa flex that was in the system before, and things are running super smoothly now. One of the things that I learned was about properly securing pipe every so many feet. I think it's like 4 feet. We did this using Unistrut and pipe clamps. Now, because some of these supports were over a tank, we wanted to avoid as much metal as possible. Sort of successful on that front. The clamps and screws are stainless, but we were able to source fiberglass Unistrut. Everywhere else in this building and next door, we used stainless steel or galvanized Unistrut, but much of that I think was because we didn't really know fiberglass Unistrut existed, and none of that other Unistrut was over an aquarium, so it kind of didn't matter. If I have problems long term with stainless steel rusting, I'll swap all of that Unistrut out for fiberglass, but in any case, we have it on this system first, and so far it's working out well. Alright guys, this is still very much a work in progress. Slowly but surely we are revamping some of our old infrastructure, and it's like a breath of fresh air once it gets done. Until next time, happy reefing.